The traditional karate dojo was lit only by fluorescent lights on the ceiling when Rosa Washington finished cleaning the last mirror on the wall. At 65, her movements were still fluid and precise, even as she carried the bucket and mop through the hallways of Academy Elite Martial Arts. It was almost 10 p.m. on a Thursday, and Rosa was eager to get home to help her 12-year-old granddaughter with her math homework. Tyler Brooks, 28, was recording content for his Instagram when he noticed the older black woman finishing her cleaning. With his 2 million followers and lucrative sports supplement sponsorships, Tyler had built his personal brand on provocative and controversial content that always generated massive engagement. "Guys," Tyler said to his camera, adjusting his black third dan karate belt with theatrical gestures, "look who's still here. Our night cleaning lady, working hard while the real warriors rest." Rosa continued her work, pretending not to hear the comments. In 43 years of cleaning, she had learned that the best strategy was to remain invisible and finish her tasks without drawing attention. Especially when young, arrogant men started looking for entertainment at her expense. "Hey lady," Tyler shouted, approaching her with the camera still rolling, "how about a quick demonstration for my followers? I bet you've never seen a real karate move in your life, have you?" Rosa stopped cleaning and glanced at him briefly. "I'm just finishing up here, young man. I don't want to get in the way of your training." Tyler let out a laugh that echoed through the empty dojo. "Get in the way? Lady, the only thing you could get in the way of is cleaning. But how about we have some fun? My followers love authentic content." What Tyler didn't know was that Rosa Washington had spent the last 40 years trying to completely forget who she really was. 40 years since she left the tatami mats after an accident that changed her life forever. 40 years keeping a secret that not even her grandchildren knew about. "Come on, Auntie," Tyler continued, using the term condescendingly, "just a little demonstration. I bet you don't even know how to do a basic karate move. How about showing my followers the difference between someone who trains and someone who just cleans?" Rosa felt that familiar sensation in her chest, like a dormant volcano beginning to awaken after decades of silence. Her eyes met Tyler's briefly, and for a split second, something passed between them that made the young instructor hesitate involuntarily. "Just an educational demonstration," Tyler insisted, now trying to hide the sudden uncertainty in his voice. "Nothing too serious, just to show beginners why it's important to respect traditional martial arts." Rosa dropped the mop against the wall and straightened slowly. His movements had a fluidity that was strange for someone who had supposedly never practiced karate. Around the dojo, the few students who were still organizing their equipment stopped to watch, sensing that something was happening. "All right," Rosa said finally, his voice as calm as the surface of a lake before a storm. "But when we're done, you're going to apologize to your followers for turning this sacred place into a circus of humiliation." Tyler laughed, but this time the sound was a little forced. "Apologize? Lady, you'll be the one apologizing to the floor when you meet it." What neither of them knew was that Rosa Washington had been Rosa Silent Storm Washington, the first black woman to become a world champion in traditional karate. She had retired at the height of her career after an accident that claimed the life of her best friend and training partner. Since then, she had sworn never to fight again, but some promises are meant to be broken when dignity is at stake. If you're enjoying this story of overcoming adversity and justice, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple moment of prejudice would become the most humiliating lesson of Tyler Brooks' life. Tyler adjusted his black belt with a theatrical gesture, clearly savoring every second of attention. "Everyone, gather around. You are about to witness a practical demonstration of why there is a hierarchy in the world of martial arts." Rosa watched as the 8 students formed a semicircle around the central tatami mat. Some seemed eager for the demonstration, others visibly uncomfortable with the situation unfolding. A young Asian woman with her hair tied back in a bun whispered something to her partner, who simply shook his head in disapproval. "Look. Everyone," Tyler continued, gesturing dramatically to his camera, "we have here a perfect example of someone who never understood that there are appropriate places for certain types of people. Elite dojos are not for, well, you know." Rosa felt that familiar twinge in her chest, the same one she had felt 40 years ago when she heard similar comments about female fighters who didn't have the profile of champions. The difference was that now, at 65, she had learned to turn anger into fuel for something much more powerful than punches. "Sensei Tyler," the young Asian woman interrupted timidly, "can we continue with our normal training? It's getting late and—" Keiko Tanaka, Are you questioning my teaching methodology? Tyler interrupted her sharply. Sit down and watch. You'll learn more in the next 5 minutes than in a month of conventional training. Rosa noticed how Tyler had used the girl's full name, a clear demonstration of authority. She also recognized the look of fear in her eyes, the same look she had seen in the mirror for 2 decades, when she woke up in a panic remembering the accident that took the life of Michelle Iron Fist Johnson, her best friend and training partner. Michelle had died because of her. It was that simple. A series of blows that Rosa had delivered with excessive force during training for the World Championship. Michelle fell, hit her head on the mat in a strange way, and never woke up. The investigation concluded that it was an accident, but Rosa knew the truth. She had lost control due to the pressure and racist comments from the audience that night. Well, cleaning lady, Tyler sneered, how about showing my students how to do a basic stance? Or is that too complicated for someone who only knows how to push a mop? Laughter echoed through the dojo, but Rosa remained motionless. She closed her eyes briefly and for a moment she was back on that tatami in Tokyo in 1982, hearing the same comments that preceded the tragedy that changed her life forever. What's the matter? Are you scared? Insisted Tyler, now circling Rosa like a predator. Or are you just going to stand there like a lamppost, like you do with a broom all day? That was when Tyler made his first fatal mistake. He pushed Rosa lightly on the shoulder. A seemingly harmless touch, but one that carried all the arrogance of someone who had never faced real consequences for his actions. Rosa absorbed the push without moving an inch. Her feet remained planted on the ground like oak roots, and Tyler felt as if he had tried to push a concrete wall. The instructor's arrogant smile faltered for a split second. Interesting, Rosa muttered, more to herself than to Tyler. It's been a long time since anyone tried to provoke me like that. There was something in Rosa's voice that made the atmosphere change completely. It wasn't threat or anger, it was the terrifying calm of someone who had already walked through much darker valleys and come out transformed. Tyler, unable to interpret the danger signals, upped the ante. Did you hear that, everyone? She thinks it's interesting. How about we show her the difference between thinking and knowing? What Tyler didn't realize was that every word, every humiliating gesture was awakening something in Rosa that had remained dormant for 2 decades. It wasn't anger or a thirst for revenge, but something much more dangerous, the crystal-clear memory of who she really was when she stopped hiding. Keiko Tanaka watched the scene with growing discomfort. There was something about the way the cleaning lady breathed, the way her muscles tensed almost imperceptibly, that reminded her of the documentaries about large predators she watched on the Discovery Channel. The calm before the attack. Last chance, ma'am, Tyler announced, now clearly irritated by Rosa's lack of response. Either accept the demonstration like an adult, or I'll call security to escort you out. And guess what? You'll lose your job too. Rosa opened her eyes slowly. When her gaze met Tyler's, the instructor felt a chill run down his spine, as if he had just awakened a dragon he thought was just a harmless lizard. All right, Rosa said finally, her voice low but laden with an authority that instantly silenced everyone present. But when we're done, I want you to explain to your students why you turned a place of learning into a circus of humiliation. Tyler laughed, but this time the sound came out nervous. Explain? Lady, you're going to have a lot to explain when you're on the floor. What none of them knew was that Rosa had spent the last 40 years not only running from her past, but perfecting an emotional control that had transformed her former destructive anger into something much more refined and devastatingly effective. Tyler adjusted his posture, clearly pleased with the respectful silence that had settled in the dojo. His 8 students formed a perfect circle around the central tatami, some eager for the demonstration, others visibly uncomfortable with the situation unfolding. Everyone, you are about to witness a lesson worth more than 6 months of training, Tyler announced theatrically, extending his arms like a showman. The difference between those who dedicate their lives to martial arts and those who just clean the floor where true fighters walk. Rosa remained motionless in the center of the tatami, but something had changed in her breathing. She closed her eyes briefly, and for a moment she was no longer in that Denver dojo. She was back at the 1982 World Championships in Tokyo, hearing identical comments from the audience before her historic fight against Yuki Iron Fist Yamamoto. Look at that black girl, someone in the stands had shouted that distant night. I bet she won't last 3 rounds against a real fighter. Rosa had won by technical knockout in the second round, but the victory had cost her dearly. The pressure of the racist comments caused her to lose control during her next training session, which led to the accidental death of Michelle Johnson. "Come on, cleaning lady," Tyler taunted, now circling Rosa like a predator. "How about showing my students how not to do a basic karate stance? Or is that too complicated for someone who only knows how to push a mop?" That was when Keiko Tanaka couldn't take it anymore and spoke up. The 22-year-old, a purple belt in karate and a master's student in sports psychology, had spent the last 2 years documenting cases of discrimination in sports for her thesis. "Sensei Tyler," she interrupted in a firm voice, "may I ask you a question? Why do you think it's necessary to humiliate someone who is just doing their job?" The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler slowly turned to Keiko, narrowing his eyes with a mixture of surprise and irritation. "Excuse me, Keiko, but who is teaching the class here?" "You are," she replied calmly. "But that shouldn't include racial humiliation disguised as a technical demonstration." Several students exchanged nervous glances. No one had ever confronted Tyler like this before. The instructor felt his face flush with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. "Racial." Tyler laughed forcedly. "This has nothing to do with race. It has to do with respect for martial arts and knowing your place." Rosa opened her eyes slowly. There was something in the way Keiko had spoken, in the courage of a young woman standing up to an established authority, that reminded her of her younger sister, Denise. She too had had that same determination, that same refusal to accept injustice in silence. Denise had died at the age of 19, the victim of a stray bullet during a police confrontation in her neighborhood. Rosa was competing in Japan when she received the news. Another person she loved, lost while she pursued glory on distant tatami mats. "Keiko," Tyler said in a dangerously low voice, "if you can't respect my teaching method, maybe you should look for another gym. There are more suitable places for people with your mentality." The threat hung in the air like toxic smoke. Keiko felt a chill run down her spine, but she stood her ground. "I'm up to date with my payments, Sensei. And I believe that everyone here deserves a learning environment based on mutual respect, not humiliation." It was then that Rosa did something no one expected. She began to smile. It wasn't a nervous or submissive smile. It was the slow, calculated smile of someone who had just found a reason to stop hiding. For 40 years, she had carried the weight of guilt for 2 deaths that were indirectly the result of her involvement in the world of fighting. Now, seeing a brave young woman defending principles of justice that she had abandoned decades ago, Rosa Washington began to remember who she really was. "Tyler," Rosa said finally, her voice conveying a quiet authority that made everyone in the room turn to her. "The young lady is right. This isn't about martial arts. It's about you trying to feel important by belittling others." Tyler turned away, his face red with indignation. "How dare you lecture me on martial arts? You don't even know what a dojo is." Rosa took a step forward and something fundamental changed in her posture. Her shoulders aligned, her center of gravity lowered imperceptibly, and her feet positioned themselves in a stance that any experienced karateka would instantly recognize as perfect. "Actually," Rosa said calmly, "I know exactly what a dojo is. And I know that this place stopped being one a long time ago." Tyler felt an inexplicable chill run down his spine. There was something about the way Rosa moved now, the way she occupied the space, that awakened all his survival instincts. "Enough talk," Tyler growled, adopting his favorite fighting stance. "I'll teach you respect the hard way." Keiko watched the scene with growing apprehension, but also with professional fascination. She had documented hundreds of hours of sparring and competitions for her research, and something about the way the cleaning lady moved reminded her of the great masters she had studied in historical videos. Rosa closed her eyes briefly and let 40 years of muscle memory resurface. Every technique perfected, every victory won, every lesson learned on the world's most brutal tatami mats. When she reopened them, Tyler was staring directly into the eyes of Rosa Silent Storm Washington, the first black woman to become a world champion in traditional karate. "Last chance to apologize," Rosa offered gently. "For her, for your students, and to turn this place back into a place of learning." Tyler laughed, but the sound came out nervous and forced. "Apologize? You'll be begging for forgiveness when you're on the floor." What Tyler couldn't see was that Rosa had already identified all his technical weaknesses. The high guard that left his body exposed, the tendency to retreat first with his right leg, the way he telegraphed his punches with micro-movements of his shoulder. 40 years away from the tatami had not erased decades of refined technical analysis. Tyler adopted his favorite fighting stance, the one he had used to intimidate hundreds of rookies over the years. Feet shoulder-width apart, fists clenched at chest height, weight slightly forward. The classic stance of someone who had learned karate in controlled environments against predictable opponents. Rosa stood motionless for a few seconds, simply observing. His eyes scanned Tyler from head to toe, automatically cataloging every technical detail. The unstable base that compromised his balance, the excessive tension in his shoulders that telegraphed every move before it even began. Still waiting? Tyler taunted, hopping slightly on his feet. Or are you just going to stand there like a lamppost? Then Rosa did something no one expected. She began to move. It wasn't a dramatic change, just a subtle repositioning of her feet, a slight lowering of her center of gravity, her shoulders relaxing into a perfectly horizontal line. But for anyone who knew what to look for, the transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. Keiko Tanaka felt a chill run down her spine. During 2 years studying sports biomechanics, she had analyzed hundreds of hours of footage of great fighters. What she had just witnessed was the transition from an ordinary person to a born predator, a change as subtle as it was devastating. Interesting, Tyler muttered, his confidence wavering for the first time. There was something about the way Rosa occupied the space now that awakened all of his survival instincts. Rosa took a step forward and Tyler instinctively backed away. The movement was so involuntary, so primitive, that several students noticed it. A black belt retreating from a cleaning lady. The power dynamic in the room had completely shifted. Is there a problem? Rosa asked softly, with a quiet authority in her voice that silenced everyone. Tyler felt the blood rush to his cheeks. His reputation was being questioned in front of his own students. He couldn't back down now, even though every fiber of his being was screaming at him to stop and apologize. No problem, Tyler replied, forcing a smile. I was just admiring your posture. Did someone teach you that on YouTube? The joke fell flat. No one laughed. The tension in the room had become almost palpable. Actually, Rosa said calmly, I learned it at a place called Tokyo International Dojo. Maybe you've heard of it. Tyler frowned. The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. Tokyo? What kind of weekend course did you take there? Keiko-chun discreetly took her cell phone out of her pocket and quickly typed, Tokyo International Karate Dojo. What she found made her blood run cold. It wasn't just any course. It was where the world's greatest karate champions of the last 4 decades had trained. Tyler, Rosa continued, her voice still calm, last chance. Apologize to Keiko for questioning her right to speak. Apologize to your students for turning this place into a circus. And most of all, apologize to yourself for becoming exactly the kind of person that martial arts should teach you not to be. The offer of clemency hung in the air like smoke. Tyler could have chosen humility. He could have acknowledged that he had crossed a line. He could have preserved what little dignity he had left. Instead, he attacked. Tyler's first strike was technically perfect, a straight, fast, and precise oizuki, executed exactly as he had learned in the manuals. It was the kind of technique that worked against 99% of the people he had trained with over the years. Rosa was not in the 99%. The movement was so fast, so fluid, that half of those present couldn't even process what had happened. Rosa was simply no longer where Tyler had aimed his fist. Her body had slid to the side like water flowing around a rock, and suddenly Tyler found himself off balance, his arm extended into thin air. Good technique, Rosa commented softly. Already repositioned and perfectly balanced. Clean form, adequate speed, but you telegraphed the movement with your right shoulder. Tyler spun around, disoriented, trying to locate his opponent. How had someone moved so fast? Beginner's luck, he muttered, more to himself than to Rosa. The second attack came in quick succession, oizuki, gyakuzuki, mawashigeri. 3 techniques linked together with the precision of someone who had practiced the combination thousands of times. It was her favorite sequence, the one she used to finish training sessions and impress beginners. Once again, Rosa simply wasn't there. This time Keiko managed to follow the movement. Rosa had lowered herself slightly, allowing the first punch to pass inches from her head. The second blow found only air as she leaned her torso back in an impossible curve. And when Tyler launched his roundhouse kick with all his strength, Rosa took a small step back, causing his foot to pass millimeters from her face. Interesting combination, Rosa observed without breaking a sweat. It works well against people who stand still, but you're leaving your left side completely exposed after the kick. Tyler was starting to sweat. This wasn't normal. He had landed thousands of blows throughout his life, and now he couldn't land a single one on a woman who had supposedly never fought before. "Stop dancing and fight," Tyler shouted, launching an even more aggressive sequence. That's when Rosa decided the demonstration had gone on long enough. Tyler's third attack, a desperate combination of punches and kicks, once again found only air. But this time something different happened. When Tyler recovered after missing all his blows, Rosa was inexplicably closer. "How?" whispered Tyler, realizing he had completely lost control of the distance. "Tyler," said Rosa softly, now an arm's length away, "do you want to know the difference between someone who learned to fight in dojos and someone who learned in international competitions?" Before Tyler could answer, Rosa did something that defied everything those present believed they knew about physics. Without appearing to use any force, without any sudden or aggressive movements, she simply applied a Taiyo Toshi technique, body projection, which Tyler recognized too late. Tyler wasn't pushed or knocked down, he was literally projected across the tatami. It wasn't a violent movement, but rather the clinical application of a technique she had perfected over decades. Tyler flew almost 2 meters through the air and landed on his back with an impact that made everyone in the room gasp. The silence that followed was absolute. Tyler lay there for a few seconds, staring at the ceiling, trying to process what had happened. He felt no pain, only the overwhelming realization that he had faced someone who operated on a level completely different from anything he had ever known. "That's impossible," Tyler muttered, trying to get up. Keiko-chun had stopped breathing. In 2 years of studying martial arts, she had never witnessed such a controlled and devastating display of technique. There was no brutality, no anger, just the clinical application of decades of experience. "Actually," Rosa said calmly, reaching out to help Tyler to his feet, "it's very simple when you understand leverage, timing, and energy transfer. These are principles I've learned over a 42-year career." Tyler ignored the outstretched hand and stood up on his own, his legs still shaking. 42 years? Professional career in what? It was Keiko who answered, her voice almost a whisper. "You don't understand who she is, do you?" Everyone turned to her, who was still holding her cell phone with the results of her search. On the screen, dozens of articles, photos, and videos confirmed what her instincts had already realized. Rosa Washington, she read aloud, also known as Silent Storm, the first black woman to become a world champion in traditional karate, considered one of the greatest technical karatekas in history. She retired undefeated after a 42-year career, following an accident that killed her training partner. The impact of the words hit the room like a bomb. Tyler felt his face go pale as reality set in. He had challenged a living martial arts legend. He had publicly humiliated someone who could have knocked him out with a casual move. First black female world champion, Tyler stammered. All his arrogance evaporating instantly. Rosa nodded silently. "I retired at 47. Since then, I've been working whatever jobs I can find. Cleaning, maintenance, simple jobs. A simple life, no spotlight, no cameras, no need to prove anything to anyone." Tyler's transformation was instantaneous and painful to watch. The arrogant man had disappeared, replaced by someone who finally understood the magnitude of his ignorance. I didn't know," Tyler whispered. "If you had known, you would have treated me with respect," Rosa interrupted gently. "But you still would have humiliated some other cleaning lady, another worker who had no credentials to defend herself." The question hurt more than any physical blow. Tyler realized that Rosa had put her finger on the root of his real problem. It wasn't ignorance about her credentials, but the fundamental arrogance that made him believe he could humiliate people based on their professions. Keiko stepped forward, her voice firm. "Sensei Tyler, for 2 years I have trained at this dojo respecting your experience, but what I witnessed today was not teaching, it was harassment disguised as instruction." Other students began to murmur in agreement. The revelation about Rosa had completely changed everyone's perspective on what they had witnessed. "Rosa," Tyler said finally, with a humility no one there had ever heard before, "I sincerely apologize to you, to Keiko, to everyone here. I have no excuse for my behavior." Rosa nodded, accepting the apology with the same elegance with which she had mastered the physical confrontation. "Thank you, Tyler, but apologies are only the first step. The question is, what are you going to do differently from now on?" Tyler looked around, seeing his students with new eyes. Some seemed disappointed in his behavior, others clearly re-evaluating everything they thought they knew about respect and hierarchy. "I'll change," Tyler promised. "It will take time, but I will change." It was then that Keiko asked a question that surprised everyone. "Ms. Washington, would you consider teaching again? Because I believe we could all learn so much more from someone who understands that true strength." Rosa smiled, the first genuine smile anyone had seen from her all night. "Maybe, dear. But not to teach fighting techniques, to teach something much more important, that respect isn't earned with belts or titles, but with character." 3 months later, the dojo had completely changed. Rosa Washington was no longer just a cleaning lady. Keiko Tanaka had convinced the dojo owner to hire her as an instructor specializing in traditional techniques and martial philosophy. Tyler Brooks had lost half of his students in the first week after the incident. The video Keiko had discreetly recorded spread across social media, showing an arrogant instructor being humiliated by a simple cleaning lady. His reputation in the martial arts community was ruined. "Sensei Rosa," Keiko said after a class on respect and humility, "thank you for teaching me that true strength does not need to be displayed to be recognized." Rosa smiled as she organized the equipment. "The best lesson I can give is simple, dear. Never judge someone by their profession, age, or appearance. We all have stories that can surprise you." Tyler continued teaching at a smaller dojo, but now with a humility forced by public shame. He had learned the hard way that arrogance comes at a price. Sometimes justice comes quietly, like a storm that transforms everything without making a sound. Rosa showed that true revenge is not destroying your opponent, but proving that greatness comes from character, not titles. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel to discover more stories about how extraordinary people turn humiliation into triumph, proving that we should never underestimate anyone based on appearances, because everyone has stories that can surprise us.